Because of the last census, this might change.
I'm glad to see how you weren't I wasn't the only one to change.
You were what?
I was the only one to change from this morning.
No, I changed. I was like, this morning I felt like it was a little cool, so I just wanted my legs and stuff. Then I thought, yeah, I'm like, oh no, sleeveless something probably.
It printed me before. I was like, yeah.
No, it's funny because I saw Barbara say, oh yeah, I changed.
Are you a charity? Is there just something about you?
You got people that were repacking and bags.
I understand. Well, I think I'm going to be in the problem. We can do a little more. Because what I told you is, looking at my calendar, I got so much stuff going on.
They were ready to me, but
So I was like,
it almost made me like,
we've got to
because I spent
check it
that's okay, no big deal.
Being a college.
That was probably a good baptism. We were customer chair of all traditions.
Yes, sir.
This song really makes trips out to the west. Shades and open the fence. It's on the ground because they don't pull well. Since we're talking about
I'd like to call the meeting to order, if I could. A few comments before we have roll call. Lee Osborne, who represents the Roanoke Valley-Alleghany Regional Commission, has requested to participate remotely in today's meeting of the Roanoke Valley TPO under the TPO's policy for electronic meeting participation, allowing for remote participations for emergency or personal matters. And a physical quorum is present. And he's requesting remote participation due to being in Richmond to attend another meeting. And unless there is an objection, we will consider the request approved by unanimous consent. So, anybody want to kick him off? Good. We won't do that then.
Is he on?
Well, welcome, Lee.
Not sure that he's joined in yet. He was not sure if he'd be able to get away, but we needed to make it available for him.
Good, well, that was a joke, by the way. Okay. We would like to amend today's agenda to include item 5A, discussion of potential VDOT smart scale policy changes. So,
Motion?
yeah, do I hear a motion?
Second.
Got a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
I don't hear any opposed, so we're okay. Okay, all right, at this time, we will have roll call, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Johnson? Mr. Clinton?
Here.
Mr. Billy Martin?
Here, sir.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Here.
Mr. North?
Here.
Mr. Radford,
Here.
Mr. Volleson,
Here.
Ms. Moon Reynolds, Mayor Turk,
Here.
Mr. Holliday,
Here.
Mr. Lyles, Mr. Stovall,
Here.
Mr. Price, Mr. Stewart,
Here.
Mr. Wagner, anyone online? Mr. King?
Here.
Mr. Wagner is here, thank you. Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, sir. I do have a few remarks I'd like to make before we get started with the meeting. Today, we're live streaming our meeting on the Roanoke Valley-Alleghany Regional Commission's Facebook page, part of our ongoing effort to improve public awareness.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, we need to still approve the consent agenda with the minutes and the modified.
Oh,
agenda.
okay.
I apologize.
Right up here, I didn't see it, I'm sorry.
No, no worries.
I do need a motion to approve the consent agenda. Do I hear a motion?
Motion.
Your second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. My apologies for messing that up. Okay, Mr. Executive Director.
We got the motion in the second, and we get the voice vote.
Okay, well then we need the voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, does that do it? Okay, anyway, we want to remind anyone watching that they're always welcome to address the TPO via one of our public hearings or in person during the public comment period in each meeting. VDOT is currently conducting a design public hearing for the proposed widening of Interstate 81 at exit 140, from exit 143 to 150. A copy of the public hearing advertisement and the map of the project is available in the lobby outside the conference room or from the TPO staff. So if you'd like to copy that, you can see it there. Get down to appointments. Every 3 years, the TPO appoints a liaison member to the Roanoke Valley Greenway Commission to represent the TPO. Mr. Lee Osborne, representing the Regional Commission, currently serves in that role and has offered to continue representing the TPO and the Greenway Commission. Before we move to a vote for Mr. Osborne, I want to ask if there are any additional nominations from the floor. Are there any additional nominations from the floor? And one more time, are there any additional nominations from the floor? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. I believe that's all I have as far as comments, Mr. Secretary. Okay, next.
Five.
What?
Let's move on to item 5.
Well, what about the,
Yeah.
I knew that, I was just checking to see if you remember. Agenda item number 5, presentation on federal carbon reduction program and project eligibility. Mr. Kevin Jones.
And Mr.
All
Jones.
right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Kevin Jones, Federal Highway, Virginia Division Office. Just gonna go over a quick summary, if you will, to a memo that you all have access to. Some of you may have seen, but if not, you can hound Brian about it because I sent him the link fresh off the press. So this will be, I'm gonna turn my video off and share my screen if that's all right. Oh. All right. Okay, so, and this is just an overview of the carbon reduction program implementation guidance. It came out earlier this year in the spring. And again, this is a real high level summary, for the sake of time and in the interest of you all's busy agenda. Okay, so carbon, of course, we all have been from up under the COVID rock long enough to know what the bipartisan infrastructure law is, bill. It is called out by name, many news stations and just coverages of federal transportation policy. And the IIJA is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which the two pretty much are the same thing in many ways. So the purpose of the carbon reduction program is to reduce transportation emissions through the development of state carbon reduction strategies. And by funding those sorts of projects that are designed to reduce transportation emissions. And so along with that comes some focus areas that are part of bill, but these focus areas are included into CRP implementation. And so some of those, I'm going to go over some of those now. So prioritizing safety in all investments and projects. I mean, if you've been around federal transportation legislation for any amount of time, you know, safety is a very important part of it. I mean, so much so that it was actually part of the name of some transportation legislation some years ago with safety law. I'm not the only ancient person on the call that remembers safety law. But it's really just Federal Highways encouragement to for states and local agencies to still consider safety, even in the use of CRP funds. And then, so Transit Flex is another one. Again, not novel in idea, but it states that funds from CRP can be flexed to FTA to fund transit projects. So for the Title 23 funds that are flexed to FTA, Section 104F of Title 23 U.S. Code allows for funds to be made and available for transit projects, or transportation planning can be transferred to FTA and administered in accordance with all applicable regulations. A state may also transfer up to 50% of the amount apportioned for the fiscal year for certain highway programs, including CRP, to other eligible apportioned highway programs. And additionally, states have the flexibility to transfer funds out of CRP to other apportioned programs, but Federal Highway, we encourage states to consider the need to transfer in light of the significant increase in apportionment funding. So just make sure that the proper coordination takes place before you do it. And so when it comes to ADA, that is something that is just sort of it underscores all of our transportation decision-making and all of our funding allocation and funding prioritization. And so this is just the reminder, very necessary reminder, that any projects receiving federal assistance, it needs to be ensured that the accessibility of ADA people with disabilities, that they can be accessed by those persons with disabilities. And that goes for curb ramps, sidewalks, crosswalks, pedestrian signals, and so forth. And if the project reduces transportation emissions, funds from CRP are available to improve accessibility and to implement recipients' ADA transition plans to upgrade facilities. So what that's saying is, you know, any project that, you know, has an accessibility component and the accessibility needs need to be met once the improvement is made, that CRP funding is allowed. Another focus is equity. And this just states that we will work with states to ensure consideration of using CRP funds for projects and inclusion of project elements to address racial equity, workforce development, economic development, and to remove barriers to opportunity, including automobile dependence in both rural and urban communities, which has been a focus of this administration, to really focus on the rural urban. And out there in Roanoke, sort of the best of both worlds, right? Like you have this big booming city, but we're all in that area. At least, many of you are familiar with the ruralness that Virginia has to offer as well. Many of you, I would imagine, live in it, but not everywhere is like that. And so, suffice it to say, not many under the sound of my voice now forget about rural needs, but a lot of people throughout the country do. So it's a priority for the administration. And so just to remove all barriers of opportunity that can perpetuate inequities to opportunity. Next, we have climate change and sustainability. So again, we encourage the recipients of CRP funds to consider climate change and sustainability throughout the planning and development of projects. To the extent to which that CRP aligns with the president's greenhouse gas reduction, climate resilience, and environmental justice commitments. And that too is administration driven, but it really is important. It's important for us to consider when we are, taking advantage of funding opportunities. And in addition, there's a constant encouragement by Federal Highway for recipients to consider projects under CRP that support climate change, because talk about wildfires, droughts, extreme heat, flooding, that those are very real environmental concerns that all federal investments need to take into consideration. So with the labor and workforce, sort of going back to the opportunity piece and just the equal opportunity, highway programs, including CRP, may provide opportunities to support creation of good paying jobs, including jobs with free and fair choice to join a union and the incorporation of strong labor standards. So, I mean, all in all, and there's more language in the memo about this, but all in all, it just really focuses on just being good stewards of federal tax dollars to Americans, is really what it comes down to. Really briefly, truck parking. That's a question we've gotten some, not from you all, but just throughout the state and throughout our region. CRP funds can be obligated for a project that's on an eligible facility related to truck parking, as long as it's proven to reduce transportation emissions. And the CRP is really, I mean, there are other allowances and other eligibilities that are in the memo that talk about, you aren't bound by, transportation alternatives or anything like that. I mean, if the project can show where it achieves the mission of CRP, then it can be considered. And more than likely that there's something that can be done to get that CRP funding involved in the project. The governing authorities are section 11101 of the bipartisan infrastructure law, which authorizes contract authority for the CRP. And there, of course, as with anything else, there are other sections that break down, the CRP and attached to it, funding. So here's a snapshot of the funding. And this is the funding based on authorization levels that were given to us. And of course, this is national, but I mean, $1 billion, it can go a long way, but it's still relatively limited funds sometimes for the needs across the country. So carbon reduction strategies. So I think this is what many of us have been wondering about. When it comes to the carbon reduction strategy requirement. So states are required to develop a carbon reduction strategy by November 15th, 2023, in consultation with any NPO designated within the state. And that's just leveraging the knowledge of you all and all of your colleagues and counterparts at other MPOs across the state and across the country for that matter. Because a lot of times, the people in DC and the people in Richmond, in Virginia's case, are really smart people. But I mean, it's those folks, boots on the ground, who are in these places like Roanoke that really know the context of just about every decision that needs to be made. And so that requirement, the part about the consultation coordination, that really just drives home the importance of the level of expertise that's offered right there in the room with you all. And so each strategy needs to support efforts to reduce transportation emissions, and it shall ID projects and strategies to reduce those transportation emissions. And as an example, transportation alternatives or congestion mitigation. And it shall facilitate the use of vehicles that result in lower emissions. And one point of note is that the development of a carbon reduction strategy is an allowable use of CRP funds. So, I mean, we aren't saying, come up with a strategy for CRP funds and you can't use CRP funds. I mean, that's happened sometime. That's happened at different points in different federal and even sometimes state across the country policy, but that's something that has been taken into consideration with this. So eligibility and coordination. Some examples of eligible activities are advanced truck stop electrification, BRT, bus rapid transit, picture the Richmond project. I see that project every day, so that jumps to mind. But designated bus lanes, TAP projects, transportation alternative, and so forth and so on. And then the mode shift projects, those are that's something that's mentioned in the memo as eligible as long as it achieves the necessary results. And those are pretty much projects that separate, the motorized traffic from the bike impaired traffic. I mean, picture a road diet or picture, bike lanes and things like that. So those are things that CRP funding can be used for. And in the memo, it is required that states coordinate with any MPO that represents the urbanized area for the given project prior to determining which activity should be carried out. And again, that's really just our folks up in headquarters recognizing that, the people in the central offices, no offense to central offices in Richmond or in DC, but it's acknowledging that the folks in the central offices, they're smart, they're capable, they know their stuff, but stuff on the ground is always changing. Whether it be Roanoke or Richmond or Sacramento, California, wherever, it's always changing. So this policy, it requires the coordination. And even in the rural areas, the regional TPOs or whatever that regional transportation organization is in rural areas, they too must be coordinated with and consulted with before determining what should be carried out. And another important part is public involvement must be documented throughout the process of any of these decisions or delivery of projects. And Davis-Bacon applies to all projects, just as any other federal investment. Davis-Bacon applies when the projects are funded with CRP, no different from other funding avenues. And that concludes my overview. Again, Brian has the link, and if you don't have it, Brian, no pressure, just let me know. And so we can get that out so for your reference. But if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, which is the best way, because I'm a country boy myself, and I always feel at home talking to Roanoke folks, because it's different in Richmond and Northern Virginia, Hampton Roads. And so as you all know, it's in some cases, not all, but there are a lot of instances where a lot of things move much faster and come back to back to back in those larger metro areas. And so the questions that we're getting, I assure that you may have, I assure you, they're being asked in much bigger, faster places. And I always want to make sure I'm a proper steward of guidance and make sure that, you know, we don't have people on different pages throughout the state. So I always make sure I get the right answer, even if it takes a day or two.
Kevin, thank you for your presentation. I like your comments about comparing Richmond and the Roanoke area. We love it up here too, and you come on up and visit us anytime you're there. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Jones?
I just wanted to comment that in light of us being in the application period for the carbon reduction program as well as SCBG, I wanted you all to get a perspective from from FHWA, and we'll make this Kevin's presentation available to the TTC as well, since a lot of those folks are actually going to be submitting the application. So we wanted folks to get a better understanding of the eligibility of different projects for this brand new program.
Okay. Any comments or questions?
Yeah, they got about $325 million to mitigate the 81 congestion. I'd say that falls into the congestion management program. Seriously, we couldn't get enough money to leverage smart scale funds on exits 137 to 128 southbound, and the northbound's being done, but you know, some federal funds to leverage that might be helpful if we could see the way clear to get any of that money. Just a question.
Any other comments or questions? I'm going to turn that over to you and let you take care of that.
I'm waiting for it. I haven't heard a reply yet.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments? If not, thank you, sir, for sharing that with us, and we hope you have a good day down in that hot Richmond area. Come on back up here in the mountains and cool off anytime.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But thank you all, and again, reach out to me anytime. And Brian, thanks again for getting me on to share. I appreciate your work.
Thank you so much, Kevin. We really appreciate it.
Okay, next item is item 5A, one that we changed here. A VDOT discussion. Who's going to hand that?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll kind of quickly introduce bringing this up today. There have been a number of discussions in the last week or so that are very early potential proposals for changes in smart scale policy. So we're really early. There's nothing written in stone. The CTV is looking at some things statewide. And what we wanted to do was talk about what we felt at this point were the potential policy changes that had the largest impact on our TPO. Not because there was something we needed to do right now, but just to inform the TPO, educate, and be aware of what those things are and potential feedback opportunities to the CTV as that discussion continues. And I appreciate Mr. North as always is knees deep in what's happening in Richmond and has been paying a lot of attention to these items. So this isn't necessarily the full breadth of what is happening in these discussions. So there may be some other things that come up. These are just the things that at this point seem to be the largest priority for us. So we've got 3 areas identified, and Brian is going to go over a couple quick bullet points about what the impacts may be. And I believe we was kind of want to open it up to some discussion about what we may want to do from then on out. Sure. And then we've got Mr. North will lead some conversation, and I warned Mr. King that we may reach out to him for some additional insights.
And just as an aside, last week's meeting of the Virginia Transportation, on the Virginia County Steering Committee on Transportation, Brooke Jackson, who works in the VDOT Richmond office, gave us an overview, but it was a shortened version. The longer version is on the VDOT CTV website if you want to go look at it. And the CTV didn't meet this month, but they meet again next month and so forth. They may have some public hearing on this topic as well later on, so we want to keep our ears open for that. But changes in the wind potentially. So I'll let Brian speak to that.
Well, thank you. As Jeremy mentioned, we've identified three of the proposed policy changes that we feel are of varying degrees of concern. Some of the items are relatively straightforward in their intent, and then other things are a bit double-edged sword. Get the good and the bad. So the first one, currently we have a cap, our sized region, 200, I think it's 500,000 and less, has a current cap of 4 applications for each body. So for the RVARC, there's 4, and there's currently 4 for this body. There is the proposal that it would cut that in half from 4 to 2, and likewise for those larger regions that have a complement of 8, they would be reduced to 4. So let's talk about. All time for this thing not to work. Okay, so a couple things that we think will be potentially possible in terms of an impact. As a little bit of a background, this round was the first round in which we, the staff and the TTC, had to actually prioritize the number of project applications that we received. And for better or for worse, with urbanized area localities, most of y'all, with the exception of Bedford and Montgomery counties, are both members of the TPO and the RVARC. So there was a bit of a, you might say, double dipping, but at the same time, we wanted, on the RVARC side, wanted to be cognizant of our rural localities. So they received first preference, and then any others that were left over, we then funneled over to be applied for the RVARC. But with that being the first time that we've ever had to prioritize and to pick, it turned out that we ended up having enough slots. In the beginning, it didn't appear that way, but there'd be a greater responsibility, we feel like, in prioritizing the projects from the available application slots. And then, as a result, currently the way we prioritize projects was certainly not in any way like the prioritization process that is used for smart scale. And in fact, I know of no MPO in the state that efficiently, we'll say, has a pre-prioritization process that says, okay, yeah, we are pretty sure that this is going to score well enough to be funded. And if so, we would love to get that process. So, you know, the idea is we want to find a much more robust prioritization process, and obviously we'd be looking to our VDOT partners to help us with such. Now, one of the things that I wanted to point out is that just because we've got a cap reduction, it does not necessarily mean that will reduce our overall percentage region-wide of being funded. You know, all things being proportional, we feel like that again, if prioritization process is tweaked, there is more thoughtfulness to the readiness and the scoreability of projects. We feel like that we can still remain as competitive as we have been in the past. So changes in how priority funds are allocated to projects. There's been a lot of discussion about the use of funds and the perception of that large projects should only get large scale, over $10 million and way above projects should be funded with HPP. Well, I'm here to tell you from the beginning, there was never any hard and fast rule or guidance that was the case. In fact, we've seen from a few regions to our north and east that they have, through the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel project and the first round I-66 project, which eventually was recalled, that those were multi-million-dollar projects, and so we feel there is a feeling that smaller projects, if you will, $10 million and less, being applied for on corridors of statewide significance, that is, in the minds of those that are wanting the big dollars, that's not the way to go. So there is a move to do a couple things. One, to change the way, to redefine the way high priority funds are spent, and to focus on a finite, smaller group of projects that really only focus on congestion mitigation. Obviously, staff is quite opposed to that, and in terms of being able to put together and think in a multimodal type of capacity. So we would love to be able to, again, to focus on highway, transit, congestion mitigation projects, bike ped projects, all the ones that we've traditionally been doing. And then the last one, which kind of piggybacks on the second one, high priority program projects are being used for small projects. Well, again, no hard and fast rule. No one said that was a bad thing. In fact, again, one of the major tenets of Smart Scale is to provide small, cost beneficial, highlight that in red and neon, and to split up projects into phases so that they are more cost beneficial. And yes, that does equate to sometimes being small projects. Again, the proposal is that there are 3 steps to the funding process, where step 1 is all localities that apply for district grant program funds are funded. Then all locality projects that apply for high priority funds are then funded with what is dedicated to those districts. Then the remainder is those regional bodies like this and the regional commission that are only eligible to apply for projects that are HPP. The proposal is to cut out step 2, and essentially, unless I'm looking at it incorrectly, it removes the eligibility of the localities to apply for high priority projects. And again, there are, you see transit, highway, and bike ped. Those are all candidates for the smaller projects. And really, they went on to talk about in some of the guidance from the CTB that the amount of projects that have been applied for in step 2 have drastically reduced over from round 1 to round 5, and I would argue that that is as a result of coordination between localities and the MPOs to essentially to give those larger HPP projects to the regional bodies to apply for, and therefore the smaller amount, because when we look at DGP, there's only a finite amount of DGP, and we've seen some applications that from localities that would serve to try to get
80–90% of that entire DGP. So I think that's part of the strategy, or as the previous president said, strategery. Those are, I guess, in short, the three things that we saw that were the most eyebrow raising, I guess. And so again, there are, I do believe that the CTB will consider the policy changes in December, and I believe that there's a November public hearing or public meeting or meetings, I think. At this point, let me switch it over to Mr. King if he's got any
Well, just questions, I guess, that would be.
questions or comments. Yeah.
Well, just before that, I just want to make a comment for clarity's sake. We have 8 projects today, 4 in the TPO and 4 in the regional commission. That's 8. So they'd be skinned back to 2 each, or a total of 4. So
That's correct.
yeah, just to be clear, we're not going from 4 to 2, period. It's really 8 to 4.
Right. Yes, where each public body currently has a
Exactly.
complement of 4, it would then reduce by 50% to 2 per body.
Just one question / comment or idea maybe, and I did have this thought till I watched this particular presentation, even though I've been following this for a while. If, you know, the CTV has a desire to change the nature of the project mix for the high priority funding, it would seem that they could set some parameters on those projects in terms of dollar value and how many applications you could submit for that. But I don't really understand why you would limit applications for your district grant funds, because those by definition could be smaller. So, you know, you would think there would be more of them, right? And so one piece of feedback we could give is to make a comment along that lines, because because now you're gonna, in theory, create an environment where you would have great difficulty potentially even spending all of your money if you are doing it this way, because, you know, even at the district level, you do need some mechanism to do smaller projects, right? And, you know, many of our small projects, you know, one big high priority project will do 12 of them or 20 of them. So I'm not really sure of the desire to have, you know, cut the number of total applications in the mix in half.
It reduces the work.
Well, that's
And
true,
review,
however.
for them to review, which is.
Yeah, and I understand from reading some of the materials and some of the applications they get are very poorly crafted and incomplete, and if they want to tighten what's considered to be a legitimate application. But I think, you know, I know at least the county, working with our partners, you know, put together some pretty nice applications. And if the goal is to pick good ones, I just feel like, you know, do this was every other year now is how often it's open. 2 is not very many for something that only happens every 2 years. So for us as a county, we could put 2 in the pot. That's not much for the whole program at all levels. But you know, if they want to cordon off part of it, why not just cordon off part of it instead of all of it?
So let me speak to, and I'll have to say I've not been involved in you know, the discussions at the CTV level, but I do understand at least some of the thoughts or the objectives over changing the number. Currently today, you've got, you know, 4 that can come from the TPO, 4 that can come from the commission, and of course you have your locality submissions that are available as well. And you know, so when you make that application, a locality can apply for project funding, and it will be, that project request will be considered out of the district grant pot, and will also be considered out of the high priority pot. If it comes from a planning agency or the TPO, it can't compete for district grant money. It only competes for high priority money, okay? So the way that we have funded, you may recall, when we talked about the steps that they go through in the funding, the first thing they do is they rank the projects by cost benefit score. And then CTV has the ability to fund them directly in that ranked order or deviate a little bit. And I think you've recalled, we've had some deviations in the past, but by and large, they follow that ranked order. And so they'll go down the list of the ranked order and they'll say, well, here's an application from Roanoke County and it's funded out of district grant. Here's an application from City of Salem and it's funded. Well, here's an application from the MPO. Well, MPO can't receive district grant money. So when you're going down in that first step, you have to skip that project. It's actually in step 2 that you come back and you look at all of the projects that would have otherwise been funded had they been from the locality. Then they'll fund that, say, TPO project that was at number 3, they'll fund that out of the statewide or high priority pot. What that actually has the effect of doing is that actually takes that high priority pot and it gives every district a little piece of that statewide priority pot. But what I think some folks have looked at is two issues. One, in the number of applications, the number of projects that actually get funded versus the number of applications that come in. We're spending as a Commonwealth, not just VDOT, but all of your localities, you all spend a significant amount of time, energy, and money and effort to prepare all those applications. And a really, really high percentage of those aren't able to get funded because our available funds are pretty thin. The other thing that happens, or at least it appears, the greater number of projects you have to ask for, you tend to ask for, some major big project needs, but then you also ask for the strategic kind of smaller scale projects in some of that mix as well. So part of the idea of reducing the number is to reduce the inefficiency in the process. Because if the overwhelming high percentage of the applications are not getting funded, that's a lost investment of time, energy, and effort, both at the locality as well as at VDOT and just Commonwealth as a whole. If we spend a lot of time, energy, and money in churning what really is a pretty high failure rate. So if we reduce the amount that we're asking for, by the statistics of it, by the metrics of it, we should reduce our failure rate, right? We'll be more successful. The other thought is that, as you ask for your key projects, those will probably be your major projects of interest, because the other piece that we've noticed is that small projects are competitive, and because you're ranking them by cost benefit order. But every project, as you probably know in your own lives, it doesn't matter whether it's a big project or a small project, you still have to have a project manager, you've got to go through a procurement process, you've got to have public involvement. They all come with the administrative costs of administering a project. So a small project usually has a higher percentage of administrative costs than a big project. Because on a big project, the percent of cost that it is to hold a public hearing is relative to a big project really small. But a small project, you still have to have that public meeting, you still have to pay everybody to go to that public meeting, so the administrative cost of that as a percentage is higher. So if our program is made up of lots and lots of small projects, the amount of the money that we're spending in the administrative process is higher. So the objectives around looking at the number of applications was to reduce the failure rate and to look at the efficiency of the overall process. And honestly, I don't know how that will play. I will say for areas that happen to be in an MPO, a regional commission, and your locality, you actually have an advantage over, say, for instance, some counties that are only a part of their locality application and maybe the regional commission, right? They only have 2 shots at it. TPO area here actually has 3 shots at it. You've got so playing partner with one another, it may actually work to your strategic advantage, to reduce the competition, in other areas, and therefore you still get 6, if you will, 2 from your locality, 2 from the regional commission, and 2 from the TPO. We've actually had a couple of prior rounds where you didn't max out the number of applications that were available. You didn't, the Allegheny Regional Commission didn't submit all 4 because they just didn't have that many requests. So in those years, I would say you probably would have been better off for everybody to have been reduced because your competition would have been less, right? But the goal here is not to create winners and losers. It's really to back up and look at it as a Commonwealth, state as a whole, to reduce the failure rate, and the amount of money that's being put into the exercise that reaps no benefit, right? And so if we could get a higher success rate by reducing the number of applications, that's the first concept. Second is, if we could work our way toward funding more meaningful, larger scale projects that have a bigger amount of the percentage of the money actually hitting the infrastructure, whether that be a rail improvement or a bicycle or trail, or all of those different modes are still eligible. And certainly the size of the projects would still be eligible. Now, the one thing that is being discussed on the high priority is that they be more targeted toward potentially the corridors of statewide significance and those that are within the V-Trans as a recognized need within that. And the idea that that need be, there is the discussion that that need be focused around true mobility capacity, i.e. congestion, but not necessarily, we think of congestion, we think of cars parked, but I mean, the improvement of mobility capacity could certainly be a rail project, that ties to Northern Virginia. So those are, I think, the concepts that come from these considerations that are taking place. I do know that for the vast majority of the more rural part of the state, I would expect that the elimination of step 2, which tends to share that statewide money around, and where a TPO or an Allegheny Regional Commission project could have gotten district grant money but wasn't eligible, so therefore it gets funded in step 2. If that step goes away, I do think the result would be a reduction in money coming to communities kind of like ours in the Salem district. I think that'll reduce the amount of money coming out of the statewide pot, because the only way you'd be able to compete for the high priority money at that point would be to compete heads up on a statewide basis against Hampton Roads, Northern Virginia, Richmond, and places that have really high capacity needs. So I don't want to keep talking on. I'm just trying to give you some concepts of where I think the logic of how it's being reviewed, to look at reducing the number of applications, why that is, and then speak to a couple of the pieces that can get misunderstood. It's not that you won't still be able to apply for high priority money, and for that high priority money to be placed on a rail project or a transit project or whatever the case may be. So hopefully that's provided some information. So yes, sir.
Yeah, quick question, Mr. King. One of the areas also is to reduce those applications that are conditional that have been submitted. In other words, they're not complete. And I think that's also one of the questions that's being kicked around. And some of the surveys that were done by 11 out of the 15 MPOs and TPOs, 7 people were against it and 4 were for it. So that would definitely improve efficiency, because if you haven't got your project ready to go, you're going to you slow everything down, and someone's got to keep watching to see if it's been updated. Things like other grants in education, if you don't have it in the deadline, you're out of luck. But I do applaud the transparency of VDOT in many of their smart scale programs, unlike some other state agencies. They don't always show you the full application of who applied for what. Right. You don't know who else applied to compete for those dollars.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Good. Anybody else have any questions on this? Comments? Ryan, do you have anything else?
No, Mr. Chair, no.
I was just thinking about it, we're very fortunate with this TPO to have the VDOT representation that we have. Good, knowledgeable people that can answer a lot of the questions that we may have and offer us help, on these projects. So, guys, we appreciate you. Do you have something?
Yeah, I just want to end on a positive note. When the governor spoke the other day, he had a lot of charts and graphs, bells and whistles, and so one of them was the Commonwealth Transportation Fund for fiscal year 2023 finished with $43.2 million. That'll go back in smart scales pot, which is good, and that's driven largely in part by the interest earnings. The recordation tax was down, that was offsetting that amount, and vehicle licenses were too, possibly related to the fact people weren't buying as many cars because of the shortages. Now, in the fiscal year 24, it's projected that we'll have a $103 million deficit, but it's early on. And the view of that right now is they're projecting motor fuels tax will be down $119 million. So will retail sales and use tax. So those kind of things can change on a dime with regards to the economy. And therefore, we could end up at the end of 24, at the end of June next year with the surplus, that will go back into smart scale. So some good news and some cautious news to watch. But it ain't all bad news, is what I'm saying.
Thank you, Mr. North.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I'll just offer up, I know that at some point, the TPO may want to communicate its interests or concerns or whatever that case may be. Certainly our Commonwealth Transportation Board member, Dr. Ray Smoot, is our representative, and I'll be glad to help facilitate. I'm sure that Dr. Smoot would be willing, if you had an identified representative from this group that was going to be kind of help craft that or consider those issues, I'd be glad to set up a time to have a conversation with Dr. Smoot and whoever that might be here from the TPO. So I just offer that up because he is involved, of course, in each of these workshops and is involved in the discussions that take place, in between those meetings, and certainly has a pulse on kind of what is being considered statewide. I'm sure I will tell you that I don't think that the clay has been formed on that yet. I think it's being formed as we work through this process. But certainly I'd be willing to help coordinate a teleconference meeting or discussion with Dr. Smoot and a couple of representatives of this group, if that would be helpful. So.
Thank you. Well, that's very much appreciated, and we may do that.
Let me ask you a question. So what I hear you saying is you would recommend to this body that we have that conversation first before we draft any letters to go to the Secretary of Transportation or others?
I think it can certainly help make sure that, you're fully informed with everything that the board member might be aware of and his perspective or thoughts on that issue. So, I certainly think that could be helpful, should do no harm.
We have time to that. We're not under the deadline.
No, we're good. So,
Yeah, Dr. Smoot's available tomorrow afternoon from 1 to 4 and Monday. And I was gonna just chat with him tomorrow, but that might be a conversation to tee up something for. I have no objection. If you want to reach out to him by text or whatever and see if there's a suitable time we can do that.
Sure.
With his schedule.
Yeah, just let me know what is desired and I'll work with him and his schedule and see what we can arrange.
yeah, and I would also add, certainly, I'm sure each of your localities are kind of looking at what the impacts might be, but if there's something that we can provide, research and analysis at the TPO staff level before we have any conversation, just so we have all of our questions and potential impacts lined up, please reach out. We're happy to kind of pull some of those analyses together. These are, Brian did a great job of pulling together just a couple of things that we've had a chance to think about in the last week or so. So there's, again, we're early in this conversation. We're not under some sort of deadline to get a statement out or anything like that right away. There's a lot of time to get involved, so we can be methodical about making sure we understand what the impacts will be. So any way that our staff and the TPO can help further these discussions, engage with Dr. Smoot or provide some deeper analysis, we're happy to do that.
When's the next CTV meeting? Ken, you know what that date is?
It is the
September something.
Yeah, it is a September meeting and it's usually the 3rd. I will get you that date here in just a minute. And I'll apologize as I'm looking for that. I am going to have to leave this meeting a tad early here in just a moment, but Mr. Gray will be here to represent EDOT. So, and sorry, CTV workshops on the 19th. So the 19th and 20th. Sometimes those days they'll take the 2-day meeting and roll it into one, but it'll probably be on that September 19th. So it is that week.
Okay. I'll tee up tomorrow that you and I have talked and this body has discussed it, and we're going to try to come up with some dates, and maybe he'll have some openings, and we'll just get an email going, try to set something up. And how's that sound? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Dr. Smoot's always, is more than willing, I think, to help try to, provide assistance or an ear, whichever the case may be, and but a great person to ask questions on what their assessment of the process is and what appears to be the most productive way to step forward. So,
thank you for your summary today.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. Anyone have any more questions for Brian while he's still there? We're going to get Brian on the next agenda item. Which is item number 6, FY 24 through 29, 6-year plan update.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Well, we've had, it's been a little while since our last meeting, so we wanted to just quickly, as many of you are aware, the FY 24-29 6-year improvement program was adopted in May, and a lot of the projects that came out of the 5th round of Smart Scale, which we were just talking about, as well as some other types of projects are being added to this SIP. So, and there's some changes, additions and subtractions. So the first set, as mentioned, are the six projects from the region here. That's actually funny on me.
Well, I accidentally clicked when I was trying to drag the thing, so I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
That messed you up.
Can you go back to the first one? One slide back, if you don't mind. Okay. Yes, and you can see the 6 projects that from the urbanized area, the urbanized localities in the region, and combination of, as you can see, a combination of highway interchange, bike ped improvements. Some of the other just new projects to the a variety of pedestrian and intersection signal improvements, and access management projects. And existing projects with updates. These are projects that you knew them by a particular project name, but most of these, except for the exit 581, exit 2 interchange project at the bottom, that just went from a temporary project number at UPC to a permanent. Everything else has had names changed, and you can see in each grouping, the one in blue was the original project name, and the new project names in white. So Roanoke River Greenway Extension replaced Roanoke River Greenway, Golden Spike, and so on for the other 3. And then as we like to see, completed projects and closed out projects. Those are things that have been completed and they've finished the audit and are closed out completely and removed from the 6-year improvement program. We see that sometimes those are kept on subsequent SIPs and subsequent TIPs, transportation improvement programs, and we say, well, you know, that thing's done. Well, why is it still on the TIP, or why is it still on the SIP? It hasn't been closed out administratively, and sometimes that takes a couple of years. As an observation, I have noticed that in this last TIP cycle, there was a great effort on behalf of VDOT to get a lot of those closed out projects from being put into our TIPs. So I obviously really appreciate that, and that shows progress. So that's all I've got for that update.
Okay, anyone have any questions for Brian? Any comments? If not, Brian, thank you.
Thank you
for the presentation. Yes, sir. Next, we'll have item number 7. Jonathan Stanton will be talking to us about the FHWA Adjusted Urban Area and TPO Study Area.
Thank you, Chair.
I was looking for you up here.
And other attendees. So today I'll be talking to you about some of the 2020 census products and their implications in the area. Now, I know the 2020 census happened maybe 3 years ago now, but data is still coming out, and there's still updates happening and things being worked on. So I'm going to cover the three most relevant transportation and TPO related products that have been spurred from the census essentially. We'll review each of them and then I'll open up for questions and we can have a little chat about it. You'll also be able to see there's a few tabloid sized maps around which might help when going through the presentation. We've at the regional commission staff have already been talking to the TTC since about May on this, so a lot of localities have given their input, and we've been having good discussion at the TTC about this. So this is really more of an informative presentation, and is really more of an informative presentation, and we'll likely be revisiting this subject in future TPO meetings. So this is just to get everyone really acquainted. The three products are the original census urban areas from the Census Bureau, the smooth urban areas, which are coming from VDOT, and then of course the MPO study area, or the TPO study boundary, or the metropolitan planning area. It has many names, and that's of course led by the TPO, and it's here at the Regional Commission. Each of these products has different implications for funding and reporting and classification and things like that. We'll go over that in some of the upcoming slides. So the first one here is the census urban areas. This is probably the most straightforward one. This comes directly from the Census Bureau. The Census released their urban area designations in early 2023. This is really a kind of a data-driven definition of what an urban area is, and it's kind of the basis for a lot of these other products, and it's really the basis for a lot of policies that the feds have, and some of the determinations that they use and things like that. Because it's really data driven, it can lead to some weird boundaries. I was browsing around, and here's Asheville. You can see there's a lot of peninsulas, a lot of complex kind of shapes, a lot of islands, things like that. This is a really messy one. But all urban areas kind of have some of this, and it's just strictly because this is really a strict definition based one. There's also been changes since the last census, so if you look on the other side of this tabloid, you'll see the changes between 2010 and 2020. The definition has really changed. The census went from population-based to housing unit-based. And that kind of changed how the edges of our urban area looks like. So this is directly from the census. These are final, and these are used to determine eligibility, say, for federal discretionary grants or other federal programs. There's a lot, but most related probably to IIJA, the difference between urban and rural, things like that. They all come back to this. So you can see here, this is the 2020 census urban area for the Roanoke Valley, and of course you can see we have our own few islands going on here, and then a major change. No longer does the census qualify an area of Montgomery County as urban, but the census doesn't have the final word on some of our transportation planning. There is another one. there are more boundaries. This one is the VDOT smooth urban areas. So if you go back, you'll notice that this boundary is not very conducive to transportation planning. There's lots of islands, but we know that folks travel, generally within the entire area. So a smooth urban area is an effort by the state transportation agencies to create a more clean, cohesive looking kind of urban boundary. These also tend to include big traffic generators, big transportation links like highways, things like that that might not be captured otherwise because highways don't have housing units or people. Same thing with airports, regular seaports or transportation or like rail links or transload facilities. None of those would be captured in the census. So it's adding things like that to it. The VDOT smooth urban area must encompass the entire census area at least, and then you kind of build out from there. So one of my examples here is, this is in Southern Virginia, Emporia, the Emporia urbanized area. You can see that the hatch marks are the census urban area, but in the smooth area, they decided to include this airstrip essentially. So this is a transportation facility, a traffic generator. It's probably related to the urban area, but it doesn't count, and so it's being added. So here is our smooth urban area on top of the census boundary, and you can tell that it's taking the census urban area and expanding on it, and it includes part of Montgomery County. So this one, in my research, I found that this doesn't influence a lot of funding streams. This is mainly about classification of urban and rural highways. There's some language in this about what areas kind of go towards our air quality management performance measures, what's measured in that, things like that. So not as important, but it is still linked to the urban areas, and also what we're about to talk about, which is so here's some additional information about it. Comments were due to VDOT on August 15th. We spoke with TTC members and locality staff and got input from them. And so we sent those comments off to VDOT. The expectation is that there'll be some continuing discussion, and indeed there has been some continuing discussion. So if you have any thoughts about the smooth urban areas, please do let me know or let your staff know. We can coordinate on that. But VDOT is looking to finalize the smooth urban areas by the end of the year, and they want to be ahead of the federal government deadline, which is summer 2024. So that brings us to our final one, our third and final one, probably the most relevant and prescient one, which is our MPO study area boundary, or our metropolitan planning area. Adjustments to these areas are encouraged after each census. Like the smooth areas, we're required to encompass the entire urban area, the entire census urban area. So for urban areas that grow really quickly, that is a 100% need to change to expand to encompass the area. For us, the census boundaries changed, but they were still within our planning study area boundary. So we didn't strictly need to make any changes, but nonetheless, it's a good opportunity to consider where development is happening, what's reasonably expected to develop in the next 20 years, and sort of look at the boundary as it is now and consider what changes will happen in the 20-year horizon and where we'd like to see that. While this is not strictly explicitly enumerated, it's also assumed that it should probably encompass the VDOT smooth area as well, because that is a urban-rural boundary as well. So you can kind of imagine this like a Russian nesting doll situation, with the census being the smallest, and then you have the VDOT smooth area being slightly larger, and then our MPO study area boundary being kind of all-encompassing for the urban area. So this adjustment deadline is December 29, 2026. We have a lot of time. We just finished the RVTP, which would normally be a deadline if folks were doing an update to their transportation plan, but we just finished one, so we have like 4 years. But it's still good to get in ahead because it has to be approved by the governor and the FHWA regional office, which can take time. So the goal is to get it in by about mid-year next year. So this is all three of them. You can tell that you have the census as the innermost. It's purple. The shade changes when you overlay the pink smooth boundary over it, and then the red line is the TPO study boundary. I will point out that the smooth area they expanded out to here, and so at a minimum it would be important to kind of expand the TPO study area boundary to include that, if not a lot of other areas. So also, Montgomery County is still included in the VDOT smooth area. Next steps, so we've been talking with locality staff about the VDOT smooth boundaries, and there's been a lot of research since the TTC meeting in May. That's all of that kind of bundled into here. We plan on, the regional commission staff plan on reviewing some locality comprehensive plan or other development documents to see what is the expectation for localities in their comp plans for expansion and growth in a 20-year timeline. And then of course the same goal again. So this was a quick kind of the highlights. There's a lot more information in the memo, and I also have a lot more information here. So I open up to comments and questions. I have some focus areas if you're interested in looking at certain areas of the whole region, and we can of course look at an online map if there's curiosity about that. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. Any questions or comments for Jonathan? Questions? All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Agenda item number 8, is there any other business that should come before the TPO this afternoon? Okay, we also have now our comment period by our RVTPO policy board members or public. Anyone have anything they would like to bring up? Barbara, you're not saying anything today?
May is Pride Month.
Good to see you. Okay, no other comments, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move that we adjourn.
Okay, motion to adjourn, do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Let's go home. Thank you, sir.
I'm glad you